I'm in Shelach. The Almighty said to Moses, saying, send forth men to scout out the land. As we know, the story of the 12 spies and the horrible repercussions that are brought about, and the sin that they committed, which was they spoke ill, they slandered the land, they spoke ill of the land of Israel, even though for the most part, besides their little opinion piece, besides a couple of opinion comments, they didn't say anything that wasn't true, actually. Which is one of the questions that I saw that the commentators asked. So that's, I'm kind of just stream of consciousness here, but that's one of the questions I was going to ask tonight is like, what did they do wrong? They only said what was true. Not only that, I'll add more to it. Well, they brought back the answers that Moses asked them to bring. Let's take a look over here. What is it that Moses told them to find out? So if you look at Numbers chapter 13, verse 17, it says as follows in my English art scroll, I believe it is. Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, or Canaan, and he said to them, ascend here in the south and climb the mountain. See the land. How is it? And the people that dwells in it. Is it strong or weak? Is it few or numerous? And how is the land in which it dwells? Is it a good or bad? And how are the cities in which it dwells? Are they open or are they fortified? How is the land? Is it fertile or lean? Or are there trees or not? Strengthen yourselves and take from the fruit of the land. And then it tells us the days of the season of first to ripe grapes. So in other words, which has to do with it, they're going to be bringing back fruit later on, and tells us that they return, bring back fruit with them. But the point is, he tells them, find out how strong the people are. And what kind of fruit grows there. Okay, let's take a look at their answer. So if you look at chapter 13, verse 27, it says, they reported to him and said, we arrived at the land to which you sent us, and indeed, it flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. They show them the gigantic gargantuan fruit, right? That you used to see on the Manischewitz bottles. The old Jewish wine bottles has a picture of two men holding, I forgot what this is called, but they're holding a long staff that's holding up a gigantic cluster of grapes. Have you ever seen that picture? It used to be on some of the wine bottles. But in any event, that's really, kind of a illustration of this, that they showed them these gigantic grapes and dates and things like that. Okay. But, it says in verse 28, the people that dwells in the land is powerful. The cities are very greatly fortified. We also saw the offspring of the giant. Amalek dwells in the air of the south. The Hittite, the Jebusite, the Amorite dwell in the mountain. The Canaanite dwells by the sea on the bank of the Jordan. So, and then it says Caleb silenced the people. Okay. So in other words, Caleb is going to interrupt them to try to get them back on Moses' side. But what did they say that was against what Moses told them to say? Nothing so far. They just said the land is amazing, the fruit and the people, but the nations are extremely powerful and the cities are fortified. Right? I don't even know if So that's what they come back saying. But that's what Moses asked them to come back and tell. So, what did they do here wrong? What was wrong in what they did? Very odd. Well, that's one question. But of course, the answer might be in verse 31, in which they said, but the men who ascended with him said, we cannot ascend to that people, for it is too strong for us. So now they're giving their opinion that it's not doable. That obviously is a clear sin. But up until this point, there's no sin. Up until verse 30, they're just giving a report, right? Or is there something wrong with this report? So that's one question. If you go back to a little bit out of order here, but if you go back to the beginning of the Parshah, the beginning, the Parshah Shelach, it says, send forth men, and Rashi comments that it's not my idea. Send for you. According to my translation, it says, send forth men if you please. Meaning to say, your prerogative. You don't have to. But if you wish to, you can send. You can send if you want to. But it's not my idea. And Rashi goes on to explain that that God really was dissatisfied. Well, why are the people asking, as it says later in Deuteronomy, the people came to Moses asking to send spies, to send scouts. And they wanted to know what the land was like. God was not happy with this because he promised them it was a good land. So what do they have to send spies to confirm it for? and actually, Rashi goes on to say, bringing from our sages, that God says, you question it? You'll see that I'll put you in a position that you'll stumble and fall into the sin of the spies, and you won't go into the land because you had no faith here. Because you didn't put your trust in God. So the thing is, why did Moses send? I mean, there's also another point is why did God tell him to send, even voluntarily, knowing the result is going to be so bad? There's also another question, which is more technical, but in the Hebrew, really, this language of send forth, you send forth, or for yourself. I mean, the literal Hebrew means send forth for yourself. That typically does not mean voluntarily. For example, let's go back at Abraham. It says lech lecha, go for you, right? Same language. There, that wasn't voluntary. That was voluntary? I didn't know that. Although Rashi there does comment, go for yourself, you'll gain because you'll become wealthy and you'll be blessed and so on and so forth. But still, the simple explanation is God was commanding Abraham to go. And I think there's many places where it uses this language. And all of a sudden over here, it means it's voluntary. But anyway, why did God agree with it to the extent of saying, look, send if you want to, but I'm telling you it's a bad idea. So why is this the case? And why did Moses agree? So I had a very interesting idea about this. And if you don't like it, it's okay because it's just me saying it, although I have a feeling it says it in authorities. I didn't have a chance to look, but I was discussing this with some of my friends in the synagogue this morning. And I thought it's a really good idea and I wanted to share it. So the question, first let's start with the question that I clearly answered. This is, why did Moses agree? Why did he do it? This is going to lead the people astray. Didn't he love the people? He didn't want them. He's almost, assisting them in committing a sin, knowing what the result will be, or knowing that it's wrong. So this is my thinking. I told him, I don't think Moses had a choice. I think he had no choice. Because I said, he's like a salesman. The people are coming to Moses and they said, we want to see what the land's all about. What are they saying? They're saying, basically, yeah, there's a lack of faith here. They say, okay, God wants us to go in, but you know what? We want to see what it's really all about before we agree to this. In other words, we want to see the bride. We don't want to go in without seeing the bride. We don't, we're not satisfied with assurances. We want to make sure that this is a good land and everything else. So think about it. If Moses would have said, no, you can't go, what would they have said? So I told him, it's like a merchant. He says he's got the best merchandise in the whole, in the whole county, right? And then he asked him to see it, and he says, no, 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 you can't see it. First you buy it, then you get to see it. Of course, you're not buying, because if you really had good stuff, you wouldn't hide it, would he? So this is Moses' conundrum here, I think. I think his conundrum is, if the people are asking to see it, and they're saying, we want to see that it's really good. We want to see these amazing fruit we've been told about. We want to see how fertile this land is. We want to see, we're told it's amazing. It's better than the land of Egypt where we came from, which was fertile, which was irrigated from the Nile. This is better. We want to see it. And we want to see the people there also. We want to see how strong they are, how big they are. Of course, that can go two ways. Just like anything can go two ways. And this is what we're going to come to soon and explain. By seeing the people and seeing the land could be viewed in two different ways. You see big people, you can say, oh my gosh, how are we going to conquer these people? But there's another way to look at it. Wow, look what this land develops. Look what kind of people are nourished from a land like this. Big and strong, powerful. Civilizations grow here. This is a land with resources, and it's a blessed place. It makes people who are strong here. This is a place we want. So that's what Moses was hoping would result. If they go with what now, there's a famous, it's actually in this week's Ethics of the Fathers, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he had, what was it? Is it 5 students? I have to look it up, how many students. But he had like his top students, right? I think there were about 5. You can look it up. But see, he asked them a question. What is the best way for a person to follow in his life? Right? And some say a good eye. Some say good friend, a good neighbor. Right? Some say not borrowing from anybody. Finally, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, he says, a good heart, that's the best way. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach's opinion is the best opinion and includes all the other opinions. So, I mean, the truth is that you could say what I'm about to say is very similar also to the first view, which is a good eye. A good eye means really a positive perception. But a good heart is even deeper. You know, a person who has emotions is just a positive and a giving person. But it's both of those ideas is what's the thing is here. A person's, what is your approach to what you're seeing and your approach to life? You know, and this was what missing with the Meraglim. The Meraglim went in a state of pessimism with a lack of faith and with negativity. And it's interesting because Rashi actually says this. In let's see, where is it here? But he says that they went the same way they came. See if I can find this. Yeah, in verse 26, in chapter 13, it says, it went and came to Moses and to Aaron. So the question is, what do you mean they went and they came? Well, I mean, literally it just means they went to the land of Canaan and they came back, right? But still, we know they went. So why do we have to say they went and they came? So Rashi comments is to teach you that the same way they came back is the way they went. Meaning they came back with a wicked plot and they left with a wicked plot too. So in other words, they already had, now was the plan fully developed before they came is unclear. It's implied from Rashi that it was. And yet at the same time, Rashi also says on the words in the beginning of the in chapter 13, verse 3, he says they were all distinguished men. Rashi comments they were all kosher and they were all upright, honest at that time. So it's a little contradictory because here he's saying they went and they came means that when they went to the land, they already were plotting a rebellious plot. And but yet in verse 3, he says that they were upstanding when they left. So it's a little confusing, but I don't really have an answer so much to that, except that it implies that they hadn't fully rebelled yet when they left, but something was already potentially in the works in their mind that was not good when they were already going. They already maybe had a lot of doubt. They already had pessimism. They already had negativity. They already were they were already, something was wrong with their view of their mission immediately on the way they were going, which explains why they came back with a bad report. And also this explains why their statements about the land had to be interrupted by Caleb even before they had a bad opinion. And this it doesn't say, but it's implied that the way they said it was wrong. The way that they said that the fruits were big and that the people were giants, he knew where they were going already. He already knew that the point was to preface that this land is a land of giants. There's no way we can get there. We're like grasshoppers to them. We're like nothing. This is this is giant land. This is not for us. It's not for people. We're going to get squashed. We came there and we came to, what's the name of that story again, where the man goes to the land of the midget? I forget that story, that myth. What's the name of this? I forget the name of it again. Anybody know? Nancy?
Gulliver's Travels.
Yes, exactly. In Gulliver's Travels. This is basically the Gulliver's Travels on its head. They were the midgets, and saying they came to the land of giants, and the people were giants, the fruit were giant. Basically, it's like they went back there to land of, it's a land of mammoth people. This is not for us. This is for giants. You see what I mean? So they reinterpreted, it's the same facts, and they turned it into a negative. Moses meant for them to go and see how amazing the land was. But like I say, either way, he had no choice. But his hope was, because the question is, why did he ask them? I didn't mention this question, but why would Moses tell them to test these things? In other words, why is Moses telling them to find out if the land is good or not? Why is Moses telling them to find out if the people are big or not? So what is Moses questioning God also? Moses should have sent them to scout. He should have said, I'm sending you to see what's strong, what are the ways that we can enter strategy. But to tell them to go find out if the land is good or not, this seems to be even rebellious, vis-a-vis Moses, that he's not. God told him it was a land flowing with milk and honey. What does he have to check if it's a good land or not? The answer is he wanted to prove that it was. He wanted to show the people that everything that he was sure that it was. Like I said, like a merchant who's sure of his merchandise. That's Moses. Moses is the salesman of God's product. And he'd tell them, sure, you go and come back and tell us how amazing the place is. Sure, I have no problem. Here's my display case. Look at it, take it out, do whatever you want. I'm telling you, this is the best. You won't find anything like it. And that's what Moses was meant to say. But unfortunately, this shows you this incredible lesson in life. Incredible lesson. Two people see the same thing. One person sees a blessing, one person sees a curse. Same thing. Same exact thing. And the answer is Amunah. We have faith or we don't. Moses walked with faith. He saw only the good. He saw God's blessing. He said, this is it. Look at this. God promised us this land. This land is amazing. It's incredible. They went there with a lack of faith to whatever degree we can understand it, even though it also says they were very righteous. But clearly, the verses are telling us to view them as people who lack faith. So from that perspective, they came with pessimism. They came with lack of confidence in their ability to do it. And all they saw is problems. All they saw is, oh no. We're like little grasshoppers here. What can we do over here? At least that's the way they describe it to the people who lacked faith. So that's how I see it, because there's a lot, because these are real difficulties. It's a very difficult story. Why did God send them? Why did Moses agree? Why did Moses ask them to look for the fruit? Moses is following along, but this is the answer. The answer is that because he wanted him to prove that it was right. He wanted to show everybody. And instead, what did they do? They turned it around. And this is such an important lesson. Where is it this again in the prophets? Maybe Hosea. I have to look it up, but it's a very famous verse. It's quoted, and it's so important that you can't forget it. It's quoted a lot in a lot of works. But straight, upright are the ways of God, right? The righteous walk in them, and the evildoers stumble in them. Famous verse. So that's what's happening over here. And it's also interesting that you can even take it further. Using that verse, upright are the ways of God. These are God's commandments. Even within a command, if you're lacking faith, it can lead you in the wrong direction. Even Torah study, God forbid, can lead a person in the wrong direction. Maybe this was a command. Maybe God did direct them to go, although Rashi doesn't understand that way. I don't know if all the commentaries agree. I think maybe some of them disagree. Nachmanides may disagree. There's a command. But the point is that if it is a command, this is even a bigger lesson. Even in a mitzvah, person, based on his approach to it, on his perspective, and on his level of faith, the person could, God forbid, turn a mitzvah into a means of going down, to a means of coming to a sin, a much worse sin. So in other words, what was their intent over here? Was their intent to be God's allies and prove to the people that the land was so rich and able to have so much nourishment that the people ate of the land, became giants? The nourishment was so good? Or were they going to turn it around and instead use it to rebel against God and say, look, this is a terrible land. God is bringing you to a terrible place. And if you think about it, this is a lesson like, you don't want to keep the 7 laws and be different than everybody. And, everybody, it's going to make problems for you, maybe on your job, maybe on your family. No, you don't want to do that. And the other person says, no, but what does Caleb say? No, this is the richness. This is the greatest fruit. And then which way did Moses lead us? Right? We can do this. We can do it. That's what he says, right? In fact, he says that their hope is gone. Let's see. We shall surely ascend and conquer it. We can surely do it. Right? That's what Caleb says. So I'm drawing you an analogy. The point is that the lesson here is an eternal lesson. It's a lesson for every time there's a fork in the road, and to go in the path that Hashem wants us to, it takes a leap of faith. And there's the voices of Caleb and Joshua and Moses, and there's the voices of the spies for tugging at us. Oh, you can't do that. Nobody does that. Oh, it's going to make problems at work and this and that. And the other voices, you can do it. You can do this. This is God, Hashem wants. This can be done. You'll succeed. Things will be even better. You'll be blessed doing this. You'll see. And the other one's telling you, no, look at these people. Some people tried to do it. I think I know some people. They ended up getting messed up. This one converted. Things went bad. Blah blah blah. Always the pessimist telling you the ones that didn't work out, that things didn't go well, whatever it is. That's the spies. Spies are telling you, pessimist. You can't do it. And it's also amazing about those voices. They only come up when you're trying to do something good. When you're trying to do something naughty, then you don't hear anything. Well, hopefully your person conscious usually does say something. But you know what I mean. The point is, a lot of times, just when we want to do something good, all of a sudden, either we or people around us like, no, you better be careful. I know it's a little extra charity. That's a good example. Oh, that's a big one. Well, extra charity. Oh, I don't know, that retirement, and I didn't want to, whatever, I don't know, the inflation today. You could probably, whatever it is. It's just, that's a big one, obviously. It's a very, very difficult one. And people are hesitant and just feel immediately like, maybe another time. Maybe another time. I'm not, Why don't they go ask the millionaires? Why did they knock on my door? That's what I don't understand. Why didn't they go? Why me? I don't have much. Coming to me to ask for some money. Why didn't they go to the other guy? Of course, doesn't know that in Tanya it says, when a person who doesn't, but that's the thing, if you don't have a lot and you give what little you can, that's worth a lot. That's worth a lot. That's you're really giving of yourself. And so that's mitzvah. It's like really like an offering. It's like a burnt offering. That's like an offering in the temple to give just, the little bit that you can, for you, that's right. In other words, when it hurts, that's so much more. That's such a powerful mitzvah. So again, those are the two voices. One voice is saying, why do I have to hurt? Why me? Why is God bothered? Why a middle class person, a low middle class person has to give? That's why does God do that? I think you should go ask someone else. It's not for me, But the other voice, the Caleb voice says, what an opportunity. What an opportunity. I can really give a piece of myself over here. I can push myself, be a little selfless. I can really do it for God. Wow. What opportunities come my way. You see, that's the difference. It's the same event, but two people the way of person, a person who's working on their faith looks at it, or a person who's a pessimist looks at it. And so this is like really a paradigm of life. I think that this whole event here is a life paradigm. And obviously Hashem was very angry about it. But we see again and again, all the stories really related to faith. All the times that the Jewish people in the desert, that they complained, it's always lack of faith. So the question is, and many of these questions were asked by my dear friend here, neighborhood I live, by Moses Frank, by Moshe Frank, Moshe Yitzchak Mordechai Frank. So he asked me some of these questions, but he asked me this other question, which is, how could, the famous question, but it came from, the heart. He said, how is it possible? It's such a deeply logical question we've all asked, but how can they sin? How could they have complained, or how could the people have listened to this and said, well, that's it, we're going back to Egypt. We're going back to, you see, obviously you all know about that, but they said, we're going to get a new leader, we're going to Egypt. Unbelievable. Crazy. Unbelievable. These people they're addicts, right? They're addicts. They need to be on a 12-step. Forgive me for saying, how could I talk about this generation, such a generation that has witnessed such miracles? How could it be? How is it possible that they should say such a thing? He wanted to know, how could they doubt? And how could they why do they need the spies? And how could they listen to this report and give up? After the most powerful empire in the world was crushed, they saw the laws of nature turn upside down. They saw unbelievable things. They saw things of biblical proportion, where the language comes from. We've never seen this in history. The kind of plagues that we've never seen anything like it. One after another. So how is it possible? And also, they lead in the desert, clouds, manna from heaven, and they get over here and they lose it. What? And it just seems, and this is another incredible lesson. I really think that, again, I think this is the answer. And he wasn't so sure, but I think it's the answer. Really, we're surrounded by miracles constantly. What's the difference between, I think this actually says in many in ethical works, what is the difference between the sun coming up, our ability to see, enjoying food, seeing a bird, hearing, what's the difference of all those things and the miracles in Egypt? Is there really a difference? What is it? And if so, what is it? So in reality, they're all God's decrees, and they don't have to exist. And the same way God decrees one, he can decree something else. So what's the difference between what we see as nature and the plagues of Egypt? The difference is one of them happens all the time, and the other one happened only once, against what seems to happen all the time. So what happens if you take these things that hardly happen and you make them happen all the time? So your sense of miraculous disappears. So unbelievably, that even though they were so pampered, but the test of faith became stronger because they were not impressed emotionally anymore by these things, because they became routes. It became, what are you doing for me lately? I was thinking about this morning was, the Jewish people here in the exile, we're living on miracles. Maybe all good people are living on miracles, but we're living on miracles. The state of Israel, the settlement of the Jewish people living in Israel lives on miracles. But you get accustomed to miracles. You get accustomed to it. People living among so many people for so long, different, and having values different than them. You basically, the fact is, you openly, in other people's face, you're vulnerable, and you're in someone else's face, living a life that's diametrically opposed to the way they live. People don't like that. They don't like it. They get angry about it. But the point is, that's what the Jewish people are in among the nations for all these centuries and thousands of years. A very visible minority telling the majority that they don't know what they're talking about, that there's another way to live, and we don't respect the way you live, really. We have a different way. You can do it, we're not going to bother you, but truth is, quietly, we think that there's a whole different way, there's a right way to behave and live. People don't like that. And so the fact that the Jewish people can continue and they're not openly hated and is a miracle. It's a miracle, and it's a miracle we get used to. We get used to it. We don't take it, So, but on back to the point is, I think this is the answer. Like, how is it that they kept questioning? Because they became, it's like doing something today. That's why last week they were talking about we're hungry or this, because they became accustomed to the miracles they had daily. Became dry already. They had the manna, and they became accustomed to it. It's a very human, but it's not the way to behave. And that's really, again, it's like this lesson for all of us. Like, we have good things that are like the manna that we have. Maybe it's a job. How about the U.S. economy? We're so lucky we're born here in such a rich country, and we have so many, conveniences and things that people living across. Look where Benjamin lives, and the difficulties he has to go through in Africa and the way they're living over there. But we were born here, right? And we were born in this generation with all this technology, and life is so much easier, and information is so much easier, all these things, And listen, God made that happen. Again, it takes a person of thought. You have to really meditate. You have to be a person of Jewish faith to understand that, God isn't. But that's because that's coming from God also. So people have knowledge. God's giving those gates of knowledge for people. God isn't just the one who's striking like some kind of Greek character, He's everything. So become accustomed, and that's unfortunately the same thing. So this is the funny thing. This is what's crazy here. They were accustomed to the miracles in the desert. They were unaccustomed to the idea of going into the land and having, within that type of situation, God taking care of them there. They got so accustomed to the life they were living in the desert that they were afraid to change it. It's almost a little bit like, I don't know, you're 25-year-old, 30-year-old in the house that doesn't want to leave, So they had this issue. But according to Hasidic thinking, there are also deep things going on. They're similar. This is a simplification, but there's ways of looking at that the spies were very on a certain, and they were on a high spiritual level, and they didn't want to leave Moses. They didn't want to leave the open miracles and divine presence. They didn't want to really engage in the physical world. But that's also, on the one hand, that's a beautiful thing, but it just shows you also the tremendous lesson that sometimes even in spirituality, we can be led based on good intentions, we could be led to sin. In other words, their spiritual ambitions were against what God wanted. They and you can find that sometimes. Somebody wants to study Torah, but the Torah says get married. They don't want to get married. They want to just study. They don't want to bother with the family. That's not what God wants. God married. That's going to interfere too much, make too many problems. Yeah, but that's not for you to decide. To be a servant, to be a servant of, and what we see again and again in the Torah, it's also fascinating. It's a lesson on its own. Is the Torah seems to praise the fact that Moses and Aaron and the people listened to the command. That's the only thing you really see again and again. And Aaron and Moses did as God commanded. Aaron did as God commanded, as God stated. And the people did as God commanded through Moses. Again and again, the same thing. And Rashi always comments, they didn't change it. They did exactly what they were told. In today's day and age, you'd call such a person a little bit of wouldn't be that impressed with them. He's a sheep. He's a follower, a big deal. People are not impressed with that. Is he a leader? He's a rebel. That's what people are impressed with. But it seems like again and again that isn't the case. And I had an idea on that as well. I think is clear. We have to understand in Hasidic thought, in Judaism altogether, this idea of why is it such a big thing? Why is it so praiseworthy for someone to be subservient to God? Why is it so important for someone to nullify their thinking to God? Why is that? That seems to be repressive. That doesn't seem to be expressive. That doesn't seem to be something that should lead to growth. It seems like that's something restricted. So why would God want that even? Doesn't God want people to live? He's a giver of life and he wants to bestow good on others. He wants us to be broad, not restricted. So it seems kind of contradictory. So I think the answer is that, and again, that's why this is it takes a lot of understanding to get this. Because at first glance, and if a person comes with an arrogant approach, they're not going to be able to get this. But the truth of the matter is, God is, as you know, is supra. He's supra rational. He's above reason, and he's also above the world. Right. So in reality, on our terms, we really can't reach him. But we want to reach him, and to reach him is basically as we touch the infinite. And obviously, to touch the infinite, there's nothing more broadening than that. There's no boundaries there. So there is only really one way, and that way is to silence ourselves and to make ourselves a vessel for him. So how can you do such a thing? And how is it possible for a small creature to be a vessel for God? And so basically so God created a system to do it. Since God and his will and his knowledge or his wisdom are one, as the Maimonides says, he is the known and the knower and the knowledge and so on. So he commanded through his will and knowledge, right, his wisdom, people to do certain things based on his will and knowledge. And through that, they unify with him. So that's how it works. So we follow that, but as long as we're present, meaning to say our ego is present there, and we don't, lack of a better term, nullify ourselves to his presence, then he can't enter there. And obviously we can't both exist, because you can't have the finite and the infinite. Technically God can do anything. But the point is that it's only through the silence of our finite restricted selves and the falsehoods that we carry and the limited views that we carry as humans, as limited beings, can we have access to the infinite? And so it's necessary to quiet that ego and to follow and to be humble. And it's through that, therefore, that we can expand. So, I mean, you can also, some people also, you could say that a little bit about altruism in general, but so it's not something that's restricting, it's actually something that is expanding. So it's a strange paradox, but yet a true one. And this is also particularly why, but yet at the same time, that's why it's important also to, like, there's 7 laws for the children of Noah, and there's 613 for Israel, and half of those work, and the different. But the point is that when a person follows God's commands, but in the commands that were given to him, so they're doing 2 things simultaneously. On the one hand, the person's nullified to God, yet through that, they also are self-expressive. Because in the deepest sense, if God says, do so and so and so, that's the deepest positive. It's a reflection of our best self, where God's really saying, I want you to do what really inside of you is there. It's in there. I mean, there's this saying in Hasidic thought, which I'm sure I mentioned before, which is, if God commanded it, then he's given the power. Within the command is the power to accomplish. So that basically means that within the command, it either reveals or implies or infers that the person innately has that ability. It's already there. It's there. He has that nature. It's just that it's the deepest, noblest of our nature. And that's why that you have a feeling that when you speak about it, you feel uplifted because, you're transcending. But it's a part, but yet at the same time, it's something that is very much in line with who we are. You don't feel that when you're doing these things that somehow you're forcing it or something like that. Certainly not if you're doing it as part of your relationship with God and you understand who God is and you're connecting to him and so on. Then if you're doing it, a person who's been taught poorly that there's a mean God who's forcing you to do things, the person may feel disgruntled. It's possible. They were taught the wrong way, taught with, by a grumpy, impatient person or parent, they may feel lousy. It's possible, unfortunately. But if they approach it correctly and they understand who commanded them to do these things and they connect properly, then they should feel an expansion as opposed to restriction. And they should feel that they're expressing themselves, their most noblest self. And so, and that's uplifting as opposed to, things that are opposed to, and that's why, again, this is going off the topic, but to expose ourselves as much as we can to examples of noble behavior and upright behavior and thinking. And I can't emphasize it enough. And what we expose ourselves to and study and learn about, including stories, whatever the sources are of noble actions, moral behavior, and tzaddikim stories or stories from what you connect to in the Noach world, whatever that is, or online, but positive stuff as opposed to negative. And I think that's also part of the test today. I think there's a lot of I've never seen so much negative things in my life that's going on today. And so it must be a test, it must be some kind of test. And we have to try to really, really separate ourselves from all these things and instead, full of our experiences with as much light as possible instead of darkness and dysfunction. Okay. Okay, another lesson from this week's that I wanted to share is in the first verse, the connection between the first verse and last week's parsha. Very important. So Rashi asked that question: what's the connection between the story of Miriam, in which that she spoke ill of Moses, even though she was trying to rebuke him for doing something wrong? What's the connection between that and the beginning of our parsha, the story of the spies? So, I mean, it's a bit obvious, but the Rashi of blessed memory brings it out. Again, I quote from our sages, from the Midrash, that the spies saw what happened to Miriam and they didn't take any lesson. They didn't take a lesson from it. They saw that she spoke ill and she meant well, and she was punished. So they should have learned from that. They should have learned from that story, and obviously, and made an about face in their plan to speak ill on the land of Israel. First of all, we see the seriousness of speaking ill of the land of Israel, that we're comparing it to speaking ill of Moses. So you can imagine how serious it is. And love for the land of Israel is a very powerful source of holiness and spirit and blessing, to be connected to the land of Israel. That also applied to Bnei Noach. I don't know, it can't hurt. It's a good thing. Yeah. Bnei Noach are connected to Moses. I harp back at that point that Maimonides brings out, that the 7 laws were reiterated at Sinai. And it's a very, very powerful idea there, that the laws were re-given in order that, that they should be given with the power of Moses' prophecy. It's a very, very powerful thing. And at the same time, as together with the Jewish people, that also shows something, about it, that there must be some connection. And I think it's part of it is obvious, and that is that the mission is together, right? I mean, the mission is the Jews have to do the 613, but the world is a big world, and the nations need to make that a kosher world, so to speak, meaning to say, a moral place, civilized place to live. And we can't function, we have to function together. And clearly that's why it was given at the same time. So I guess that's pretty much it. Oh, but I wanted to point out from this idea of again, I wanted to say something about this, that the spies should have learned, in that it shows also an important lesson for life. We should always keep our eyes open as far as what lesson we can learn when things are going around us, right? I think the Baal Shem Tov says, whatever you see, and later, Hasidic masters, whatever you see is a lesson in divine service. Whatever you see around you is some lesson in divine service. And they should have taken that lesson. You see, Rashi said, telling this to us, that the spies saw Miriam, they should have taken a lesson. That's a way of looking at things. And when the point is that their minds weren't learning lessons. You have to be focused on taking lessons and going with an open mind. And then they would have made the proper connection between what happened there, and that they shouldn't follow and do a similar thing and speak ill. We also see the terrible power of speaking ill, and you really see it. I mean, I've seen it in experience. One off-color word about someone, it can shake you. You can lose a certain degree of your respect for somebody, even if you don't know it's true and you're not sure it's true. But as soon as you hear something negative, you're changing the way you look at that other person, and that's really shows you the terrible damage that speaking ill of another person can do. It really is very much underestimated in terms of the wrong of doing it. Yeah, of course, we have to be careful. Sometimes it needs to be said because we need to help other people or warn other people about somebody. I understand that, but still we have to be very careful with it, because, if we don't know for sure, we could really be harming someone and their reputation, and that reputation affects, whether other people associate with them, whether they get business, whether they could get all kinds of different relationship-related things, and that could cause very serious damage to someone. And we may be completely wrong. We don't know. That we, maybe mistaken what we heard. It could be the things there are circumstances we're unaware of. A lot of things. So, and that's basically kind of what the spies did here. They literally did lashon hara because they basically told the truth. It's just that the spin was a negative spin.